Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from Capital One Bank, New York Community Bank, Eastern Consolidated, M&T Bank, Sterling National Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Customers Bank, Ariel Property Advisors, Dime Community Bank. Additional funding is made possible by grants from AM Trust Title, AVR Realty Company, Avison Young, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chase Commercial Mortgage, Citizens Bank, CPEX Real Estate Services, Colliers International NYC, Cohen Equities, Collins Building Services, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handler Real Estate Organization, Handro Properties, Hodges Ward Elliott Inc., Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Bank, New Banks, Newmark Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rockefeller Group, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Meringoff Family Foundation, the Moynihan Organization, Moynihan Capital Partners, and these friends.
Advertising, branding, social media. What is this world? You know, how do you get your message across? Who do you reach? Who are you going to? The millenniums? Are you going to the Altacacas? You know, where are we going? What's happening? What's changed in this world over the last 20, 30 years? Today, due to the help of my executive director, and executive producer, senior member of the family, I've put together these three advertising executives to talk about what's happening in this market. My guests include Cory Berger, who is the managing director at Pereira Odell, Ryan Berger, who is the CEO of Berger Shop and a partner at HYPR, and last but not least, the father of these two sons. They also play basketball?
Everyone plays basketball.
Okay, everybody plays basketball.
That's how you do that to get into the family.
Ron Berger, who is the chairman of Berger Shop. So when you went into this business, maybe about 45 years ago, what was it like?
Well, I think what was different about it, it was like everything else from 40 years ago, it was a simpler time and a simpler business, mostly from a media point of view. And from an agency, there were a thing called advertising agencies, and it was very clear what they were and what they did. And what they did for the most part was create campaigns.
So answering that question, what is your company? You have two different companies. What is your company's?
So Berger Shop is a consultancy that injects brands into culture. We've been around for 9 years. And HYPR is the world's largest search engine for influencers. We're the largest database to identify influencers.
Explain to me how people access your database.
So they come to hyperbrands.com. We have data on over 11 million global people, or what we call influencers, who they are, what their audience looks like from the standpoint of where their audience lives, where their social media audience age, what is their gender, so that you understand who you're reaching and where you're reaching them. So we sell access to this database to brands all over the world to come in and identify who should spread their message for them. Because one of the things we really believe in is that people listen and people trust people. So if you could identify the right people to spread your message, that's really what HYPR delivers.
So I have a question. with regard to that, especially in today's world of this sexual harassment and all the rest. What happened to those people who were part of this branding, who were being utilized, for different products?
Well, you're seeing that across every channel. Obviously, you could have former athletes who have been in commercials and end up getting in trouble. You could have people
there was a guy who used to do Avis,
Hertz.
Yep.
Hertz,
Well, you had OJ. I mean, you have lots of people, right? So it runs the gamut. But one of the things we really help our clients is helping understand who are the right people to spread your message. Have they been in trouble? Have they worked with a brand that might be a conflict? So if you're Nike and you want to work with an individual, you want to make sure that that individual hasn't worked before with Reebok or Adidas or Under Armour or some of your competitors. So we help you understand not only the trouble or the issues that a person may have, but we also help you understand partnerships they've had so that you can dominate.
So what's different? What do you run? And what's different between you and your brother?
Well,
besides the fact
where to
that
begin,
you're
right?
young.
He's a lot smarter.
So Pereira Nodell is a mid-sized independent creative agency. We have offices in New York and San Francisco. We're about 160 people combined. And we work with brands across all categories and help them identify what their purpose is and bring that purpose to life across all kinds of campaigns and programs that run from TV all the way down to social media and
So in
content
today's
of all
world,
types.
okay, years ago you didn't even know what social media. I mean, it wasn't.
Well, it wasn't anything.
There wasn't
Right.
social media, and reading something on your website or your website. I mean, social media really came around in 2006, 2007, maybe initially with Twitter and to a certain level. And today, you have a variety of sources of social media. And as we were talking, in addition to social media, you have apps, which are really a form of social media.
Yeah, I think there's infinite touch points now that brands need to figure out what's the right way to use to engage their consumer. I think whereas 30, 40 years ago, marketers spent their money in trying to figure out how to disrupt people's lives and kind of interrupt them and stand out. And I think today that doesn't work anymore.
So I'm going to use a good example. 35, 40 years ago, your dad had Timberland as a client, right? You have Timberland as a client. What was your approach to the consumer or to get people on the
Actually,
brand?
it's a terrific example because when I worked on Timberland in the late 79, 80, there was no brand called Timberland. So I actually...
You created it.
It was a work boot made up in New Hampshire, and like a lot of the shoe companies up there. So we actually created the Timberland brand as a performance work boot, but obviously that had a fashion sensibility about it. So whereas that's what I did for the 4 or 5 years and created a worldwide brand called Timberland, Cory's, and this is interestingly totally unrelated, pitches the business, wins it, and
Today they're obviously existing in a totally different climate. They're a $1 billion global brand, but
And
there's
they're
a
not
number
only
of trade
a shoe
wins.
business. They're
Correct. They've expanded their product offering significantly, and there's a number of trade wins that they face as a retail brand in a really tough environment with stores. There's a real estate show primarily, right? And in many instances,
a business show.
A business show. Timberland is a real estate company. They own footprints all across the world, and obviously getting people to go in stores.
Relating to that, which is a perfect thing, which I'm going to get to your brother in a second. Timberland has bricks and mortar retail. Timberland has also internet, and Timberland products are sold by the gorilla,
Foot Locker.
Amazon, and everyone else,
Right.
and other.
Yep.
Okay. So how do they identify and how do they make themselves today an influence that people are going to use?
Well, I mean, you look at the brand, it's always been carried by people, right? You've always known that when you look at a Timberland brand, there's always been a individual profile who's always worn that, right? It's a cool looking boot, it's stylish, it can be worn across multiple different weathers. And what they've done so great over the past time that they've had the business is work with the right people who do have that influence. So they realize that Timberland is a big aspect of hip hop, as an example. So they've worked with hip hop artists like Nas to be part of commercials, to be part of a campaign. It's not coming out anymore and saying, hi, we're Timberland, or hi, we're any brand, pay attention to us. It's we're going to work with the right people who have the right influence to put the shoe on that individual and let everybody see that, because
But
the
it's-
idea
you
is
know
to
what?
influence the culture.
I agree that, the company started really as a shoe company, but today the company with their retail stores is an apparel company. Okay, so it's more than a shoe company, but the question is which market they want to go after also.
I mean, I think, Mike, I would say they're a lifestyle company that operates in the apparel and fashion business. But I think one of the things that gives Ryan and Cory an advantage in the world today is their understanding of what the power of a brand is, which is what started, which was how I helped create. So all of the stuff that they're doing are the tactics that the current world allows you to do, because the Timberland brand is such a strong brand.
I just did a report on 1010 Wins, and I spoke about wine and spirits. When your father and I were around, it was called liquor stores, okay? And ironically, when I was on my way to Wins, the taxi passed a liquor store that said liquor store. It didn't say wine. Now you don't see anything called liquor stores. Everything is branded wine and spirits or something like that. And if you look at a great example would be the tequila business, with what George Clooney made a mint, and the other thing, the program which Entourage helped Avion. When you're going to a company, okay, you have a variety of companies. In addition, you have the opposite extreme. You have a difficult product when you're selling Memorial Sloan Kettering.
Right.
I mean, they are the premier cancer center in the world. There is no question that, but it's a product that people don't like hearing about.
Right, and it's also a product. It's the only client we have that we hope nobody ever uses. But in Memorial Sloan Kettering's situation, they're a 150-year-old cancer institution. To your point, they developed a reputation as being the preeminent leader in that space across the world, and not only in terms of their treatment, but developing all kinds of innovative treatments that they then teach to doctors who go on and work for their competitors. And when we started working with them 4 years ago, the healthcare environment, certainly in the tri-state area, had really started to change, and a lot of competitors, as we talked about earlier, had really started to invest more in marketing and advertising to get their message across. So it's funny, in many ways, Memorial Sloan Kettering was helping build a lot of their competitors' business by teaching them the treatments and innovations that they came up with. And what they realized is they needed to start getting out there and reaching people who might not be as familiar with the brand as the older generation was.
I'll give you another one. I'm not sure if your dad was involved. Quaker Oats, the product over there. It was a different type of business. Quaker Oats was probably, at one time, mostly print and television media. You at HYPR, I believe, did a major thing with Quaker Oats, which was totally unique.
Yeah, we work with Pepsi globally. Quaker is one of the brands under Pepsi, and did a big opening for a store in the West Village, actually, called Oatmeals, and needed 4 or 5 influencers from HYPR to come in and tell the world about the store and tell the world about the benefits and how great Quaker Oats is.
How come you didn't get me? I like oatmeal.
You weren't in the system. But I think
We're at a different level on the oatmeal.
exactly, you were reading Cream of Wheat. I think the key from how I attack things is, to your question, is we look at things in the sense of how do you equip people with that message and have people spread that message for you. You look at the work he did, for example, his agency around Dos Equis and Most Interesting Man in the World, which you talked a little bit about liquor, right? The last line in that campaign of every spot was, "I don't drink beer, but when I do, I prefer Dos Equis." Well, we grew up with commercials that said, here's the product and you better eat it, drink it, or engage with it. Now you have brands, the most successful ad campaign in the last 10 years for the most part, talking, well, I don't really drink it much, but when I do, this is the one that I prefer. So it's this different way of speaking to people. It's people speaking to people. It's using modern technology to reach people with brands, whether it's apps, social media, innovative advertising, but it really is providing a message that the audience is going to engage with.
how has the advertising changed in the auto to current day?
Well, I'll give you an example of a campaign that I did, which probably, you know, one of the most famous ones. I did one best of commercial at Ad Age for Volvo. So it was about survivors. It was about people who had survived life-threatening accidents in Volvos and had been authenticated that the accident had truly saved, the car had actually saved their lives. And it was a great 60-second and 30-second commercial. Today, that idea would live all across the different channels, social media, the site that they would
Events.
have.
Events.
So therefore, the idea would be the same exact idea, that Volvo saves lives. We build safe cars, but the real benefit of us is we save people's lives. And, you know, interesting, Cory, you know, has a new car account, and they'll be doing things.
We're working with Mini USA, so we're helping them, you know, figure out how they could create, you know, marketing and advertising that I think builds on some of the iconic work that they've done over the last couple of decades, but also, you know, recognizes that we're in a market, the United States, that people like to buy really big cars, and certainly with gas prices where they are, that becomes even more prevalent. Figuring out how we communicate to people, in particularly a creative class, which is where Minis really lived, how they present their offering in a way that makes it feel like Mini's right for them. But I think the point we're trying to make is that whereas it used to be about how do you interrupt people and disrupt them, now you understand people's time is really valuable, and it's a competition for their attention.
I mean, my sense, the word, which is we're all sort of circling, is, and you guys use, is the word engagement. How do you engage your audience today? Because you have the tools to be able to do it in ways that 40 years ago we weren't able to.
I think the engagement is really key, because today's consumer, perhaps based on age group, is looking for short, succinct information as opposed to a 1-minute commercial.
But not always. I mean, I think it's about respecting their time and understanding that if you're going to engage with them, you need to provide something of value. And that could be entertainment, but it also could be a utility that provides value and adds to their life. And I think brands need to understand that attention, that time is valuable, and they need to deliver something for that time that brands enjoy, that people enjoy engaging with.
And I'd say that the biggest change that you've seen, or that people have seen in our lives, is that in the past 10 years, he now has 5 grandchildren. Cory has 2 kids and I have 3 kids. And having 5 kids under the age of 10, our wives need to know how to handle the kids and how to operate as far as behavior and things that kids need. So our wives aren't going to watch commercials during shows, for example. They might fast forward them. They might not change the channel. But when our wives are in the park and other moms tell our wives about a product or a need, our wives might read a mom blog. It might be an hour reading that blog, but it might help them understand how to do homework better with the children, or how to cook a certain meal healthy. As Cory said, it's not about long content or short. It's about understanding people's lives and how to engage with them.
What's valuable and important to them.
You know, when we're in the green room, we brought up apps today in certain cases are running companies, like all the Uber, Lyft. That's an app-driven company. It's not anything else. Yeah. If they didn't have the app, there was no business. People don't make a phone call. The black car service business was a telephone business.
Well, it's a perfect example of the same product being delivered, but businesses being built around, that's their touch point. That's, instead of going into a store to buy something, you touch a button on your phone and a car shows up.
What effect in your mind on your customers does a Amazon or a Jet, which is now owned by, by Walmart, have on your business?
Huge. I mean, one of the things that a lot of clients are asking for now is an Amazon strategy. We worked with Blue Apron for many years, and the single biggest the single biggest impact on their business over the last year in particular was Amazon buying Whole Foods, announcing that they're going to get into the direct-to-consumer food business. And obviously, the result of that hasn't been so positive on Blue Apron's stock price since they went public. And so, again, more and more
Now,
brands are realizing that Amazon
follow-
is either a partner
if you follow
or a
that,
competitor or
when
both.
Fresh Direct came out, they were near bankruptcy. They weren't able to get the consumer really into it. Fresh Direct is a multi-billion-dollar company today, okay, because the consumer, their consumer, has done a different market.
I think brands are still trying to figure out whether Amazon is a competitor or a partner, or in many cases both. And I think accepting the reality of the role Amazon is now playing and the ever-increasing prominence that they're having across all categories is something that a lot of companies are wrestling with and asking for strategies on how to deal with.
Here's an example. 55% of product searches on the internet now are actually through Amazon, not through Google. People are going to the Amazon site and putting in baby diapers. And then, so they are now living on the site.
They've become the search engine.
As a result, the three big holding companies, three of them, Publicis, IPG, and Omnicom, announced yesterday, or WW announced that they're increasing their advertising spending on Amazon by 4-fold. So Amazon is actually the biggest competitor to Facebook and Google in terms of their advertising dominance, because people are going there to product search.
But can we see in the same manner Alibaba, which is basically the Amazon of China, coming into the market over here and being an influencer?
Yeah, I think you have a lot of categories saying, wait a sec, is Amazon now going to come into our category, right? This week, CVS and Aetna announced the merger, and one of the reasons why people think is because they believe Amazon's going to try and get in the pharmaceutical and kind of drug business. And I think a lot of that is just our company leaders of different sectors figuring out, wait, are we thinking about how to move our business forward and protecting our market share against what Amazon might be able to steal?
Let's talk about rebrand. Yeah.
I was just going to add, and you take a company like Alibaba, who's a big fan of influencers, and it's really interesting to see how they're looking at what's going on specifically here and everywhere else in the country and trying to identify who are the right people to spread their message. Because the cool thing about Amazon is that everyone talks about them all the time. I mean, when you get something, I got it from Amazon, but the biggest ad they have is that box that sits in front of everybody's door every single day, and in my door, there's 20 of them. The boxes come, and that is the ultimate branding for Amazon.
As somebody said,
Amazon,
you've never met anyone who actually, you've never met an Amazon employee.
Right.
It's amazing.
The irony is, in different parts of the country, apartment complexes today are building Amazon lockers outside of them because they have the need. I mean, part of the Whole Foods operation today is the Amazon lockers are in the store because too much of the merchandise has been robbed when it's been left at the door. So you need this, okay? It's like what happened with Fresh Direct, that certain building owners had to build cold rooms so they could keep the food. What about rebranding today? Okay, and I'll use another example that Dad was involved with. Okay, he made Make the Donuts. Okay, time to make the donuts. Dunkin' Donuts was Dunkin' Donuts. Now there's a comment coming around that it may be called Dunkin' as opposed to donuts because donuts aren't healthy or certain people don't like donuts. GMO, all the conditions, food allergies, every fakakta story.
I love donuts.
My daughter.
Okay, the munchkins, I realize. Okay. So what about the rebranding of a company or the rebranding of a healthcare system that we're talking about?
I mean, these guys could talk better about it than I can. The only thing I would say from sort of how I come at it is that rebrand normally happens when you want people to talk, right? And you want something to change. So when you're Dunkin', as an example, and you're a little bit looking at culture and saying, well, people are all about health and juicing and working out, and we live in an environment where everything's about exercise, do you want to be the company that talks about Wi-Fi and coffee and quick ability to pick up food, or do you want to be a company that talks about basically making people overweight and driving youth to become big because they're eating donuts every single day? So it's that way of changing the conversation, and I look at things around how are people talking.
You mean
what's
we
the
don't have
conversation?
influencers over there gouging themselves with Donuts?
You have it both ways. You have it both ways. But I really look at it from the standpoint that what do you want people to talk about as your brand? And a lot of times when we look at rebranding, it's companies want to change the conversation.
But what Dunkin' is doing a terrific, and has, because I faced the issue years ago around whether they should begin to change their name. You can't change the name. The name is Dunkin' Donuts, but their campaign for many years has been America Runs on Dunkin'. And the evolution to you're using coffee and beverages as the center of the business, and everything else that comes around it.
They're a beverage business.
They're a beverage business.
The beverage business today, if you look at it this way, you walk around the city of New York, you have over the last 3 years proliferation of at least 15 new coffee brands, okay? You know, all different names, you know, all different locations. If you're pitching that customer, how do you tell them what makes them different? What makes them Pret, Maison Kaiser, okay, Orwas's, okay?
Yep.
Yeah, certainly coffee and coffee shops have become, and Starbucks has a lot to do with this, have become increasingly popular. I think we're a little bit skewed by the experience we have on the coast, whether you're here in New York or you're in San Francisco or LA. It's a large country, and in the middle of the country, I don't think has Mason Kaiser, for instance. So I think, you know, and that's a big heart, obviously, of where Dunkin' Donuts, you know, lives.
Look at Blockbuster and look at Redbox, okay, on the DVDs, okay? There is a company surviving in the Midwest still having stores with DVDs because that's a different consumer. It's a different product.
Yeah, but they only have a year longer.
That's right. I mean, I think getting back to the rebranding conversation, for us, it always comes back to what's a brand's purpose and their reason for being. And I think companies need to always be spending a lot of time thinking about that. And if that needs to be evolved for what's happening in today's culture, then rebranding is a part of that.
Are companies spending more money on advertising and branding today, or were they spending more in your generation?
I think some companies are spending less, but then you take a category like the hospital business that didn't exist 30 years ago. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars being spent in a category that didn't exist, not to mention the whole pharma. So there's been a shift. Some companies are spending
right,
some
but
category.
In the same way that we were talking before, how much people are using print media compared to...
Yeah. It's not that their budgets are more or less, it's that they're spending them in different channels. So now, 20, 30 years ago, there was no Amazon to spend on. There was no Facebook. There was no Google. There was no ability to connect with someone who's got 140,000 followers and lives in the middle of Iowa, and you want them to post once a month on your behalf. That never existed. So the budgets are the same, or maybe a little bit bigger. The difference is they all just don't go to CBS, ABC, and NBC, and ESPN anymore. We're seeing that with everything going on with the channels and the layoffs.
And
right,
it's much more spread
and
out.
We're seeing people not even going to the TV. We're seeing them on the internet. Okay,
Well, that's a whole other
Or the same
angle of cord cutting and people not wanting to even have televisions in their house, and consuming media in a very, very different way.
I mean, one of the reasons why this is, the companies are spending money in so many different, is the ability to measure what's going on and see results, positive or negative, on a much more immediate basis. They know if they run stuff on Facebook ads, they know who they're talking to, and they see the immediacy of the results. Whereas if they run something in print, it's a much harder thing to measure on a less timely basis.
I mean, I think it's always been about how do you create a really strong brand. The vehicle to do that was always traditional advertising. Now it's about your experience, it's about your product, and then it's about how do you wrap that in advertising to communicate that to a large audience. Take a brand like Tesla. I think every time you hear the word Tesla or Amazon, you think about, wow, it's this great brand, but very rarely do you actually see advertising. Up until recently with Amazon, you don't ever see it with Tesla.
Right.
So it's always about, like I keep going back to, what is your brand's reason for being? What's that purpose? And then depending on what's happening in your category, what's the right way to communicate that?
We could spend the next hour, but we're finished. Okay, we've finished. I'd like to thank Cory, Ryan, and Ron, and I'll see you next week.